All right, let's jump right into this explainer on how Islam structures its incredibly rich history of divine revelation. If you've ever wondered how Islamic theology views figures like Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad within a single, continuous narrative, you are in the exact right place. We're going to map out the complete architecture of prophethood in Islam.
To unpack this massive theological framework, we'll quickly step through 5 key layers: prophets versus messengers, traits of the chosen, the Abrahamic connection, the revealed scriptures, and finally some fascinating debates beyond the named prophets.
So kicking things off with Section 1, Prophets versus Messengers.
You know, it's pretty easy to use the words prophet and messenger interchangeably in casual conversation, but in Islamic theology, they represent very distinct tiers of responsibility. We start with the Arabic word nabi, which simply translates to prophet. A nabi is an individual specifically chosen to receive divine truth from God. They're basically moral exemplars meant to guide their people back on track. It's a foundational role, and this specific term pops up exactly 75 times in the Quran.
Then we have the term Rasul, meaning messenger. And what's really interesting here is just how often this word is used. Rasul appears over 300 times in the text, way more often than Nabi. A Rasul is tasked with a much heavier burden. They aren't just receiving truth, they are actively transmitting a divine decree or an entirely new set of laws to a community, and this is often delivered through an angel, like Gabriel.
This brilliantly illustrates the core distinction. Think of it kind of like a nesting doll. While every single messenger is also a prophet, not every prophet is a messenger. Make sense? A messenger, or Rasul, just has that added, elevated duty of bringing a completely new legal or structural framework from God down to humanity.
Moving right along to Section 2, the traits of the chosen.
So what exactly was their job description? Well, regardless of the era they lived in, every single prophet shared these core typologies. It was kind of a standardization so believers could actually identify a true prophet. They were all strict advocates of absolute monotheism, which is known in Arabic as tawhid. They acted as warners, letting humanity know about the ultimate realities of hell and paradise. And while many, like Moses and Jesus, are famous for miracles, the texts strictly emphasize that these miracles are absolutely never done by the prophet's own power. No way. They happen solely by God's volition to serve as divine proof.
The absolutely crucial point here is that they were all preaching the exact same continuous message. This passage from Surah Ashrah is key because it frames Islam not as some brand new religion, but as the original, primordial faith of unity and obedience that was already decreed to Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. But here's a captivating historical nuance for you. Were these chosen figures absolutely perfect? Well, the theology actually evolved over time. In early Islam, texts freely acknowledge the mistakes of prophets, like Adam's misstep in the garden or Moses accidentally killing a man. These flaws had real teaching value. They taught everyday humans how to repent. But by the 9th century, Sunni Islam underwent a major theological shift. They largely adopted the doctrine that prophets were completely sinless or infallible. The reasoning? To absolutely guarantee the reliability and purity of the divine messages they were transmitting.
This later belief in absolute prophetic purity was captured beautifully by the renowned Sufi mystic Rumi. When people asked how a prophet could interact with a corrupted world and not be tainted by it, Rumi used a striking metaphor. He compared the devil's influence to a dog's saliva being poured into an ocean. An ordinary person is like a small cup of water, super easily contaminated. But a prophet is a vast ocean, completely unaffected by the impurity.
All right, Section 3, the Abrahamic connection.
This whole system isn't just a random assortment of holy men, it's a very specific, interconnected family tree. The Quran presents a chronological chain of prophets, starting with the very first human, Adam, moving through major era-defining messengers like Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, and finalizing with Muhammad. In Islamic theology, Muhammad is referred to as the seal of the prophets, which literally means he's the final messenger sent to guide humanity.
And the structure of the text purposefully highlights parallels within this lineage. Muhammad's life deeply mirrors that of Abraham, the father of monotheism. Both of these men faced intense, life-threatening rejection for fighting pagan idolatry. Both were forced to flee their home cities for safety. By highlighting these repeating historical patterns, the text firmly anchors Muhammad into that ancient, highly respected Abrahamic tradition.
On to Section 4, the revealed scriptures. Now, these messengers didn't just bring oral warnings. Many brought foundational texts, and mapping this out is absolutely vital for understanding the shared DNA between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. The Quran explicitly names several holy books given to previous prophets. The Torah was given to Musa, or Moses, aligning with the Torah. The Zabur was given to Dawood, or David, recognized as the Psalms. And the Injil was given to Isa, or Jesus, known as the Gospel. Believing in all of these original revealed scriptures is actually a mandatory article of faith for Muslims.
There is, however, a very distinct theological caveat here regarding the Gospel, the Injil. Islam views the original Injil as a direct, singular revelation handed to Jesus by God. This is fundamentally different from the current canonical Christian Gospels, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which Muslim scholars view as historical accounts written about Jesus by his contemporaries much later on.
Finally, Section 5, Beyond the Named Prophets.
We've covered the mainstream timeline, but what about the edges, where scholarly debate really thrives? Let's start with a totally unexpected question that sparked a massive historical debate among classical Islamic theologians. Could women be prophets?
In the 11th century, scholars from the Zahirite school of thought boldly argued yes. They pointed out that the Quran documents angels speaking directly to women, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, Sarah, the mother of Isaac, and Asiya, the adoptive mother of Moses. They noted that Mary is explicitly called a woman of truth, the exact same title given to Joseph. Plus, she's described as devoutly obedient, using the very same Arabic linguistic terms reserved for male prophets. Pretty fascinating, right?
However, that was definitely not the majority view. The mainstream Sunni tradition maintains a strict rejection of female prophethood, often classifying the idea as a heretical innovation. They base their stance on specific verses, most notably Quran 12:109, which plainly states, "We have only sent men prior to you." So the mainstream consensus settled on prophethood being exclusively male.
But the debates don't stop at gender. They extend to some highly mysterious historical figures too. Take Al-Khidr, a wise figure who travels the seas with Moses. Is he an angel, a saint, or a prophet? What about Luqman the sage, sent to Ethiopia? Or even Samson, the legendary strongman from the Bible, who is deeply respected in Islamic exegesis, but whose exact status is still debated by scholars today. The lines can get incredibly blurry.
Which leaves us with this final, staggering thought. The Quran states that God sent a messenger to every single community and nation that has ever existed on earth. Now, it only explicitly mentions 25 by name. But if there was a messenger for every civilization in human history, that means those 25 are just a microscopic fraction of a massive hidden history. Think about it. How many thousands of unnamed prophet stories have simply been lost to time? It completely changes the scale of how you view the history of world religions. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.